Hi, my name is Jeffro, and this is Digital Dominance, the podcast for service-based small business owners who are ready to seize the recognition and growth that their company deserves. You've worked hard to build a business you're proud of. Now it's time for Digital Domination. Welcome back to Digital Dominance. Today, we're diving into branding with a twist through the lens of athletics, personal values, and leadership. Joining me is Zachary Colman, a web strategy consultant who works with athletic-driven brands through his company, Creative. And no, I did not stutter. That's how it's pronounced. Zach has built a personal brand where he shares insights on using personal development principles to shape powerful brands. So we're going to talk about how service businesses can apply these same principles to build authentic, value-driven brands that truly connect with their audience. So Zach, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you and I first met at the B2B Marketing Expo in Los Angeles last year. We've been trying to coordinate and make this happen. I loved your booth. I loved all the things you were doing with your company. And since then, you've given a TEDx talk to further bolster your brand, which is awesome. So just to give the listeners some context, your consultancy focuses on athletic-driven brands, like I mentioned. But the thing that drove you to start Creative in the first place was kind of the lack of customer-centric focus in many companies. Can you tell us about that a little bit and how that's kind of guided you?
Yeah, I feel, as I've kind of, I was in the corporate world for, I don't even remember how long, 7-8 years, moved up the corporate ladder quite fast, jump hopped a lot. And, when I finally went out on my own, there was this sense of, as companies get bigger, they tend to lose that personal interaction and that personal community building thing. And that's really what branding is at its core, right? Is community. And so I just saw a lack of it, and with social media and digital marketing, I saw a trend where a lot of companies were starting to utilize it too transactionally instead of less so than community. And so just the combination of those two things, kind of together made me really, push out and kind of say, hey, there has to be a way that we can work with other companies or clients and have that be more of a community-centric style environment. And that's kind of what I thrive for. I think our main vision for the company is we help people find their communities, no matter if it's a gym, no matter if it's just going to get their car redone, or they're going to, go buy an athletic product at a store. It's trying to find those communities of people where it's less so like just this, oh, hey, buy our product. And it's like, hey, you match our values. You come here and you continue to buy our product. We continue to send you products. We continue to have you come in and service us. And our team is the same way, right? They all kind of culminate. And so I try to really drive the growth of our business and the brands that we work with much more towards like, hey, let's try to help build you a community of people that match your values and your vision for what you're trying to achieve for the company.
So what about, that sounds nice in theory. And I think for some brands, it's a little easier to make that mental leap to accept that and put it into practice. Mm-hmm. What about, a service-based business owner, maybe like a plumber or something? How do you translate that and say, build a community around, plumbing business? How do you translate the personal beliefs and values into the brand to create that stronger connection and community?
Yeah, well, I would say first and foremost, I think that a problem that we'll say like a plumber, like a small plumber usually has is, they usually start off doing it themselves, right? They're in it. They do the plumbing probably, we'll just say 5 years, and then they decide, hey, I can do it better. I'm going to go out and do it on my own. That's really starting for them to build that personal brand. That's the perfect opportunity for them to build that personal brand. There will come a time when you get to a point, and I don't necessarily work with plumbers, so I don't know the exact numbers, but there will come a time when you're, when I went through this, where it's like, oh, like I'm doing all the work, I'm making all the money, I have a 40 to 50% profit margin, but I'm burnt out. I need to start delegating and hiring. And 99% of the time when they first start doing that, they just hire, which is fine. It's a figure it out stage. It's, I would say roughly it's around 250 to 500K a year mark when they start realizing, hey, something's missing here, something's going on. They're probably still going out and just doing transactional based situations to try to bring in new clients and new things. And there comes a time when it's like, there has to be something more here to grow this business. And there has to be something more that I can do to not have the burnout, because I'm still feeling like I'm, not saying doing all the employees' work, but, like it's just not working for them. They don't have a lot of A players in, or a lot of people within the business that have the same vision as them. And so, long story short, what I'm trying to get at here is, for a plumber, for instance, you want to go from a me to a we, right? And so you can delegate before you become to a we, but there comes a time when vision is really going to take precedence, vision and values. And 99% of the time, a brand as a person is really going to be what evolves the business and where the business goes and where you can take that business. I mean, a good example of this is, you have someone who's a complete not nice person and a person that is a nice person, and watch both of them grow a business. And you're going to see one just continue to not have great retention with employees, not have great retention with clients, probably not do as well. And you have these people over here that are like, hey, we're hiring people that we value and that value us. And so there comes a time with a mind shift when it starts being like, oh, this is no longer about me making 40 to 50% profit margins. I need to start, which is usually called the value death period, which is like, oh, I have to start spending more and bringing more people in that actually have a very similar vision that I do. And the best way to do that and to find those people is to understand who you are, right? Because if you looked at yourself and you were like, hey, and I'll use me as an example, I very much drive on, connection. Connection is a huge value of mine, which I lost, which is a complete different story. But, that is now one of my values personally. I value that connection. And so every time we hire people, I make sure they match that similar value. Like, how do you connect with clients? How do you connect with other employees? What drives you during the day? Like, what helps you? What motivates you? And that really is kind of like a guide. It's kind of a guide, right? To find those right people. Is there other metrics involved? Yeah, you're going to have to focus on, personality types, and, hiring's always a 50-50, no matter how much onboarding you have. But they're a guide that you can start building this sense of what the types of people that come into your company, and there's nothing wrong and there's nothing right, but guiding them. And so that's when also the vision comes into play, when it's like, I'm making 500K a year, making 50% profit margins. And we'll just use the 500K as an example, because it's usually a good teetering point within business and on any level where they kind of have to make this shift. Where they're like, wow, like I have to spend more money on marketing and my employees basically not being cheap, right? And you have to have this mentality shift where you realize it's not about me, it's about us. And so that vision of where you want to take the company comes into huger play, because now you can start, one, not having that burnout because you have this mentality, but two, you start setting that vision with those people that have similar values as you. And that's what starts driving the people in the organization to want to further help you develop the brand, the company as a whole. And that's what goes from a me to a we. Now, going from a we to an us is now customer centric, right? It's like, all right, how do we take these similar values and how do we display these to our audience? When prospects come to me and they're like, I'm making 100 a year, we need to create a logo. I'll be the first to say, go create a logo right now. You're only making 100 a year. Like, that's not what branding is, So you don't really need it yet, because you need to start focusing on you and building that message yourself, leading by example, understanding what that is. And then once you get to a certain point where you focus on the employees and the customers, those values now take frame in external stuff, not just internal. So you're looking at, really having the colors, the fonts, the location, the experience, all still match that vision and those values that you're trying to portray. And that's really branding. I'm not gonna say branding at its core, because there's so much more to it than that, but really kind of trying to emphasize that message of your vision and your values to your customer. And that will actually start allowing you to be like, oh, how do we market? What do my customers value? Because we know our values, we know who they are now. Like, how do we find them? And so that kind of is what takes them to a we to an us. Is you'll start building that advocacy of customers that are like, man, they created this offer. They did this plumbing service that really matched around a theme of what I like. And that could be from anything to the way they onboard, to the way they do customer service, to the way they do their digital stuff. And so those are all those 1% things that you have to think about that actually make a true difference in the growth of a business. But you can't really get there until you're at a point where you're like, hey, like, I know who I am. I know what my message is. And I always like to relay that, because I think there's a taboo in the industry right now where it's like, personal branding is all about me. It's all about me and who I am. And it's like, well, yeah, it somewhat is, but that personal brand is just you with the head controlling certain things. And that personal brand will turn into much more of a community brand once you start to emphasize those similar traits, and then you basically keep them consistent amongst your employees and your clients.
All right, let me jump in here. So, I mean, you covered a lot of things.
I did.
All at once right there. So let me kind of consolidate and summarize here what I'm hearing. So if you start out and you're doing all this stuff by yourself, there's a reason people like you and hire you, refer to you, right? Mm-hmm. You may realize that consciously or not, but once you start getting to that point where you are bringing someone else in, you need to, at that point, be intentional, do some reflecting, figure out, okay, what makes me different? Why do people like me? Is it because I show up on time? Is it because I put on the shoe covers when I come in their house? Is it because I'm not just like, all right, where's the bathroom? Let me fix it. Is it like, do I talk to them and remember them from last time? Like, oh yeah, how's Johnny doing in college? Like, what is it that people like? And then not just hiring, because everybody's different. They got their different methods and styles, right? Because that first phase that you're saying, with turning into the we, you're bringing people in, these are different people. So naturally, what defined you and what people liked about you is going to get lost unless you articulate that and train your people to value the same things you value. So actually putting it in writing, putting it in your trainings, making checks in your metrics or whatever you do to make sure you're ensuring quality with customers on your surveys and everything, making sure that stuff is part of that culture that you're creating. And only then will it bleed out into the us, where the people that find you now start hearing that and seeing that, okay, this company is doing those things. It wasn't just John anymore. Now it's his company. And so there's kind of that tiered approach of being intentional and figuring out, this is why I'm different. This is what I like. I only buy high quality parts. Like, you got to figure it out, define it, teach your team, and it will go out from there. Because if you don't, then like you said, it's going to be transactional. I'm just going to hire people. They're going to do the tasks, and we're just going to be another company out there doing the same thing as anybody else. We're going to compete on price, and we're just going to be spinning our wheels.
Well, here's the funny thing you said there, because I was actually going to relay to this. But yes, you're exactly right. But there's a part in there you said where we have to teach our employees. I think there's a huge thing, and in our industry, for instance, where companies will come to us and they'll be like, just develop me a website, just develop me, a brand package, whatever it may be. And I think the problem is they're not leading by example at that point. They're not putting themselves in a position where they're like, hey, I need to learn this enough. Just like I learned plumbing. I'm not saying they're going to do all the branding for their company in the future or all their marketing, but I need to understand it enough that I can teach my team our vision or our values and understand those processes. So anytime we're working with clients, it goes back to my TED talk. When it comes out, I'll send you a link. You can put it down in the description. But where I talk about how branding helps develop you as a person, because at the end of the day, you're going to need to figure these things out and have someone like you or like me help them do that. So they understand it enough so that when they have to evolve or rebrand or make it to the next situation, that, yeah, they could still hire someone else, but they understand themselves enough at that point that it's a lot, not going to say a lot easier, but they're leading their team. They're utilizing the projects to actually build better confidence in their team, because now their team's like, oh man, yeah, this really matches the vision. I like how this is going. I like how this is working. And so they need to lead by example. And that's the best way for me to put it with anything in their business, especially when they're smaller and they are wearing multiple hats.
Yeah. And I'll give an example too. Like if you don't take the time to figure this out, then you're just going to hire somebody. You're going to, after a while, you're going to be frustrated with them. Like, man, they don't do it right. Or they never do X, Y, Z. It's like, well, did you train them on that? Did you teach them on that? Do they know that's what you're looking for? And because if you don't do that, they didn't work out, and fire them, find somebody else. And maybe eventually you get lucky and find someone with the same values. But it's so much easier if you front load that process, figure it out, state it up front. Like, this is what we're looking for. This is what I expect for someone from my team. And then, of course, yeah, you can give them feedback and they can live up to those guidelines, because now they exist, right? If they don't exist, how can you expect them to actually follow them?
Well, I think it's safe to say very similar, because we both develop websites for clients. I'll go through a web development phase, and yeah, we'll have some templatized, I like to call semi-template like things in place already for our clients, but we'll go through that discovery with them because we want them to know, hey, like, this is why we are doing this, not just like, hey, like, we're going from A to, just show me what it looks like and then I'll approve it or not. Like, no, like, you need to know why. Like, you need to understand why. If we want to get to the outcome that you want, the only way we can do that as a team, and the only way that we can do that as a team, is if we sit down and we go over, like, oh, this is what the sitemap's going to look like. This is why the flow is going to be this way, or why it's going to be this way. So they understand it enough that now when those leads are coming in, they can go, oh, aha, like, I know that my leads are somewhat coming from here, or they're coming from here. I think there's, especially on the marketing, and I think you saw me kind of write a post about this yesterday and you liked it, but it's the whole concept of, and I think we've all had those nightmare clients or those nightmare agencies that we worked with. I always think it's, a communication issue first and foremost, but no one's right or no one's wrong. But it's usually like, hey, bring us 10x leads. That's what we want. We want you to bring us 100 leads. And the hard part with that is it's like, well, how do you know you can handle 100 new clients? Do you have the employees? Are you have enough employees in place? Do you have enough structure? Do you have the retention in place that you can handle those employees? Those clients. And then what usually happens is the campaign goes sour because they expect these high results, but at the same time, that due diligence of understanding the vision and the values and the stuff isn't done first, and it makes everyone's lives harder.
Yeah. Well, paying for a high quality business website is kind of a forcing function to go through this process, right? Because if you hire, a freelancer on Fiverr, they're not going to do this. They're going to spit out their template and say, have a nice day. Right. Whereas if you hire an experienced agency like this, that, like, I'm sure you've got onboarding questions, right? To figure out, okay, who's their target customer? What are their core services? What do these things care about? And like, that's so that our writers can understand what we're putting on this website. We're not just going to say, we offer XYZ services. Call us today. Like, no, like, you could have done that yourself. If you're hiring us, like, we're going to force you, we're going to draw this out of you, right? To make, not just to make you interesting, but to make you compelling so we can understand those values and share them with the world, right? That's how it's going to expand the brand and the community.
Yeah, I think it's a funny thing that's happened because, what could end up happening is it's just like, just build me a website, and they go in, they build it. The client doesn't like it. The client wastes the money on the web development agency, goes somewhere else, spends more money. goes to the same mistake over and over. They don't learn from their mistake, vice versa. The agency spending more of the money that they're bringing in from the company. And I'll be the first to say, like, yeah, we're companies. We want the best ROI possible in profit margin on the project we're giving you, because we have to pay our people, right? So there's this concept of, like, why can't it just be a win-win? Why can't we just both look at each other and say, hey, you're going to get the best solution possible, and you're going to make our lives easier to give you the results that you want if we were a partner and we actually work this out and figure this out together, instead of you both sides following those same mistakes of just creating, you could call it a product if you wanted to. I like to call it a service because it's more of a service than a product in my mind.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important for the business owner to understand the website is an important piece of the marketing puzzle, but it's not the end all be all. Like, once the website's done, you don't just walk away and say, all right, now I get all these clients coming in. Like, sure, you'll get some, but you probably want to be optimizing that site for the search engines over time. You probably want to be running campaigns to drive traffic to that page, right? Whether that's paid ads or networking, going to chamber events, like all of that. Like, you need a place to send people that looks good, that's going to convert those people into prospects and customers. But it's not all going to happen by itself just because you have a good website now.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because I get so many, I mean, you've probably dealt with it too. I mean, at the end of the day, who said that? I've seen, I've had mentors and worked with people that have multi-million-dollar brands. And in the service industry, that's off topic. I'll talk about that in a sec. But in the service industry itself, you have this spectrum of clients that want to develop this website, and they think it's all about leads, when there's different types of websites, like there's different types of companies. For a service-based industry, for instance, yeah, you're going to have this website that's going to be focused much more probably around local lead gen, and the website could take a huge factor into it. But then you're going to have possibly a local B2B company where positioning it's much more for positioning. Maybe they're not bringing in the leads per se, but they're hiring your position. And so what I'm trying to go after here is a website can have so many different angles. It's not all about, hey, let's just build this website and get lit business from it. It's like, hey, how do you position yourself in the market with your website? Show your values, show that stuff, so that, I'm a big component of what when we focus on our local businesses is the Google business profiles, right? And I'm a very big component of, hey, your website is actually the last thing we want people to see. I'm a big component on, you want it to position yourself in a way so when people find you on Google, they look at your Google business profile, and your positioning is already there. It already shows your team, your website, your services, and they more likely call you through that. And then the website's just for those people that are like, oh, I need a little bit more trust. Let me go to their website and see their positioning, right? And then comes the advocacy, and that goes back to my community building aspect. Like, I don't look at digital marketing as a transactional type system. I look at it as a community type system. Like, reviews are huge, and I teach my clients, for the most part, like, no, you have to send those review requests. Like, we want you to send 5 a day. We lead by example, get to know your customers, and get them to leave you a review, even possibly throw up an offer in there. If they bring someone, let them be your advocates, because then it does two things. You're building a community, and then you're also allowing the search engines to bring in new clients. And so it's kind of a win-win overall, but I look at it as much more of a community type digital marketing campaign, similar with our blog content, right? One of our really large clients, who's less so of a service and much more, well, they're a service, but they have hundreds of locations. We look at their blog content as like, this is a retention play. Like, yeah, you're going to raise in the ranking, you're going to bring on new people, but you're teaching your existing members the value no matter what location they're coming from. And so utilize your blog from that perspective, because then it's going to higher your retention rate. You're going to get people keeping you on top of mind. And then most likely what's going to happen is you're still going to get leads from it, but you're also going to build advocacy and the part that I love, which is community. A lot of our packages include community building efforts for our service-based businesses alongside the digital marketing, because I'm like, you need to, especially if you're a one-man show and you only have one location, you're, let's say, at around $1 million or under, which I highly recommend you don't open a second location until you're at that point. But it's all about community. Like, you have enough business in a 3-mile radius. Stop thinking about the world. I know you want to leave a huge legacy, but start small. Start with your 3-mile radius.
Crawl before you can walk, before you can run, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think you've given us kind of a great overview of how this works, and I think it's really helpful for people. So hopefully you guys have been taking notes. Thank you for joining me today, Zach. I love the focus that you have with your business, and I think this has all been a really great reminder for us to get specific, know our target customers, know our values, and articulate those so that we can actually, create these brands that are meaningful and that people can connect with. For those of you guys listening, you can use the links in the show notes to connect with Zach, go watch his TEDx talk. And I have one last question for you, Zach. What's one piece of advice you'd like to leave with the service-based business owners in the audience?
I would say, I would say stop focusing on lead generation and start focusing on sustainability, sustainable lead flow. That's something that comes a lot harder to do. And I think that it's also something that's actually going to help your business trend forward. And I know that a lot of people don't know what that means, but it's much more focus on steady growth instead of these one-hit wonder things where you're going to bring in like 50 clients at once and then,
take the long-term view, right?
Yeah, take the long-term view. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Zach, thanks again for being here and spending time with us. Thanks to all of you guys for listening. Please make sure to leave a review for the show, and I'll see you back here for the next episode of Digital Dominance. Thanks for tuning in to the Digital Dominance Podcast. This show is brought to you by FroBro.com. If you are a B2B service provider and you're ready to transform your website into a high-converting, lead-generating sales tool, go to FroBro.com/revive to learn more.